What is up, everybody? Mark on the mic here. My good friend Ryan Muckenhirn across from me right now with his coffee cup. I forgot mine, which he thinks is his, but it's still mine because it's got my name on it. Great topic today, Ryan. Lightweight hunting bipods, a listener request.
Yeah.
And a good one.
Yes.
My personal, bipod use history has ebbed and flowed like the tide. There's been periods where it's a necessity. I always have to have it. Right now, I guess I'm in the flow state where I've been kind of going without, just using my backpack. Maybe in some ways rolling the dice, saving some weight, maybe saving some bulk on the forend of my rifle, maybe rolling the dice. Whenever I have a bipod, there's been times where There's been times where I thought I was going to use it and ended up not using it. And then there's been times where I was really glad I had it. We've got a smattering here.
We got a couple.
We got a couple that you have pulled up in your phone that we'll mention.
Yes. In spirit, they're here.
And in spirit here. Yeah, I think 2 or 3 different models. What are your thoughts on hunting bipods?
I, too, Mark, have been in a state of ebb and flow with bipod use, only because I think that when I was not as experienced in hunting in the places where I would use a bipod, I thought it was something you had to have. And then the more I used them, the more I found that was not the case. Or rather, the bipod I wanted was never the bipod that worked ideally.
I'll mention this.
Yeah.
Depending on where you live and hunt geographically, could be very, dictate if you may or may not want to use a bipod. Like I've mentioned a million times, I grew up in Western Washington hunting blacktails, Roosevelts. I mean, I can't think of a time where I would have used a bipod growing up. Yeah. I mean, the vegetation was always too tall, too thick.
Your ferns are this tall.
Maybe if you were on a logging road and shooting into like a younger clear cut, sure, put the old bipod down and you might be able to do that. But, I mean, it never crossed my mind that I would need one.
Well, I guess what I found is if the bipod was deployed, I'd have to have a very ideal shooting platform or like spot. My target would have to be at a certain height, like elevation-wise relative to my firing position. My ground had to be good. Things had to be, fairly level. The reality is it just never works out that way, or it just doesn't seem to. When I was doing a lot of predator calling, I was using a Harris bipod, not dissimilar from this BRS that we have here, except it was the much taller one, so that I could deploy it and sit with the pod. And the only reason I went away from that is just bulk. It was huge. So when I folded it up, I'd have leg sections that were, probably 14 inches long, even folded, hanging off the end of my rifle. And so it made it somewhat inconvenient to carry depending on where I was at. And then it was weight, and then it was space. Trying to get it into my case was kind of a pain in the butt.
I would say, but
it was useful then.
It was useful then. And that's when I really started seeing, but when I moved from Washington to western Nebraska, and I'd say a lot of times in, actually deer hunting, but a lot of predator hunting situations, that's when I started seeing and using, at the times the Harris was,
kind of the king of
it was kind
pods.
of the king of that.
There wasn't a lot out there then besides the Harris.
I bought a Harris knockoff.
Yeah. That didn't do you well, did it?
It performed as such. They're a good bipod. There's still a lot that I like about that bipod. It seemed, we got a lot of different models here. I think at the time that was, at least to my knowledge, one of the more expensive ones.
Sure.
It was certainly at the upper threshold of like something that I might be able to afford. Now we've got a few here that are, quite a bit more expensive. But you were talking about, you got to have the perfect ground, this, that, the other.
A lot of times,
but then also these bipods come with a degree of just adjustability that allows you to accommodate for that as well.
Sometimes. I'm not on the bipod train now.
You're just off it right now.
Kind of, yeah.
Give it 2 weeks.
No, I wouldn't say that. I had to look back. It was actually many years ago. I used a bipod a few years ago to take a shot on a pronghorn I will say that the bipod provided me with more frustration than it provided me with solution. I broke a couple of rules. I crawled away from my pack, which I just shouldn't have done. If I'd have had my pack there, things would have been fine. Attached to my pack were my shooting sticks, which had I brought my pack with me, I'd have had them too. And so I had to use my bipod, and it was this very bipod in front of us.
Well, thank goodness you had it with you.
Well, sort of. There was a lot of monkey business, Mark, and that was not the fault of the bipod. It was the fault of myself. Like I said, I abandoned some other critical equipment that would have exempted the use of the bipod in that firing solution. But I got it done, and what I had to do is I had to extend my leg here, and I had to fold this. I don't want to fold it because I'll snap my fingers. I had to fold this leg up, and then I had to put a rock underneath this like knuckle, and then this has a swivel on it, and then I had to induce swivel to it so that I could get stable, and it was shaky at best. The bipod allowed me to take the shot, although there are other things that would have allowed me to take the shot faster, and I believe more stable.
So I'll say
in that instance,
but also I'll say that depends. Now, like I said, I'm in the flow state of I've been not using a bipod lately. Yeah. I've been using my pack a lot, right? That also requires me to keep my pack with me at all times. There have been times where I don't want to. You've got a bipedal bipod there here, so you walk it across the table.
Yes.
There's been times where I was hunting mule deer, right? We had spotted these bucks, or a buck and a bunch of does, like across this valley, and I was having to crawl up over a rise, right? I think they're about 300 and some yards away. Well, what I didn't want to do was have my backpack on, which would potentially reveal, me coming. I couldn't stay as, I guess, low profile with my pack on.
Sure.
So then if I wanted to take it off, I would have had to drag it with me, which is also a pain when you're also trying to bring a rifle with you and can create noise. I had a little bipod on the front. I shimmied up to the crest of the hill, got on the bipod, shot that mule deer dead at 300 something, 320, 350, something like that. I don't know. Anyway, that was a time where I was in bipod use, and I was glad that I had it.
The last time, also a mule deer for me, that it worked out exactly as I would have thought it was. It was 2016. I peeked up over a knoll. The knoll terminated into a cliff. I had the pod out, snuck the rifle forward, got in a wonderful shooting position, shot the biggest mule deer of my life, made possible by the Harris BRS bipod.
It's just one of those things that can be very, very nice to have.
Yes.
It can be a difference maker.
Yes.
Even though I said I shoot off my pack. Well, sometimes your pack is more or less empty depending on the scenario. Sometimes I'll actually shove things into my pack, like my puffy jacket, into the top lid, so it fills that out, that section out more voluminous, and I'll use that. But there's definitely times where if you had your pack and a bipod,
you'd have a phenomenal shooting solution.
This one, this Spartan Precision. Not as high, or won't get you as high as some of the other models. I think these guys make some different models too. But, if you're able to stack packs and then use this. So it just can be, they can be a very big asset.
I guess that's what leads us to the other part of this title here is lightweight bipods for hunting. So that they won't be so cumbersome like that big giant monstrosity that I was running. And they don't overburden you. So that you picked up that Spartan. This one's super clever. So
how are you? Before the podcast, you were saying we have to talk about this one.
But what I really like about the Spartan is that
you did an accent.
Always clever piece of kit.
Yeah.
The Spartan, you don't have to keep on your rifle, and it's not intended to be kept on your rifle, which is really, really cool. It kind of a bit nerve-wracking at first if you're not intimately familiar with magnets and how they work. But they have a
rare earth metals and such.
Yeah,
I think
so. It weighs nothing. I mean, it's extremely lightweight, and you'll notice it doesn't have a conventional attachment like the Harris or this MDT or this Atlas. It's not hooking up to a Picatinny rail, an Arca rail, or a sling swivel stud. It's got this little magnet, I don't know what we'll call this, coupling here, that hooks into a little thing that you put on your gun, whether you install that like directly into the stock or they've got a sling swivel stud adapter.
This came with a bunch of...
in this clever piece of kit. I closed the box on you. I feel bad. I'm sorry. Anyway, the idea is here, you affix this. So curiously, the piece we need is not present. You
may need that.
Yeah. You affix this little coupling to your rifle. This gets stowed in a pouch or any variety of little harnesses that they make for these specifically. And when you need the pod, you take it out and you just stick it in there. And it's well retained. This is not a situation in which I would be concerned with it simply falling out. Mm-hmm. The idea is, though, is it's an auxiliary piece. You carry it on you. And then when you need it, you put it in. Whereas all three of the other examples here are more or less strong mounted to the rifle, either via Picatinny, Arca, or the sling swivel stud in the case of the Harris. So these are really, really, really clever.
Very lightweight.
Yes. Ounces. Whereas the Harris, for instance, is approaching pounds. These are about 14 ounces. So they're light, but they're not that light. Hang that on the front of my Kimber, and I've got a completely different, conversation.
It's even the even this has a magnetic component when you bring the light simple twist lock here. Mm-hmm. Put that in, tighten it back up.
Very sweet piece.
Maybe not as much adjustability as some of the other ones.
No, but here again, like if I look at the Harris, which is this is probably like the most successful bipod out there, right? Like they're everywhere. Mm-hmm. Military service, law enforcement service, competition and hunters alike have trusted Harris for now several decades. So it has a swivel component, which I think is very important. I've had them before without the swivel component, and they're sometimes a huge hindrance. So the swivel component, if I have, slightly uneven terrain, that swivel can take care of that. It is length adjustable in a couple different forms and fashions. You can extend the leg out and then have like a maximum and a minimum, and then there's an intermediate setting where you can set the leg. If you've got a situation in which you just need a little bit more height, I can set the leg short, or I can retract
Gotcha.
it. So they do have a ton of adjustability.
Quick to deploy.
Very. They're a little more adjustable than the Spartan. When you look at like the Atlas and the MDT, which probably come more from like the tactical and competitive shooter side of things, here we have like maximum adjustability. We have preloading for the legs. You can sweep them forward. You can pull them back. You have, of course, a tilt adjustment, and then you have height adjustment. So these, full featured bipods, lots and lots and lots of room for movement in there. The Atlas, surprising how light they are, considering how robust they are. When you look at them, like these are, I think, about 11 ounces, somewhere in there.
So probably somewhere I'd have to. Let me see. What model do we think that one is? I've got my chart here.
It's probably that one right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, about 11 ounces.
11 ounces. So it's lighter than the Harris. The only thing you'd really have to consider is, okay, what is your attachment point? Mm-hmm. If it's a Picatinny rail, now you have to have a Picatinny rail on your gun. Your gun might not be set up to accept a Picatinny rail without some sort of clever adapting or gunsmithing, depending, or an Arca rail. So there's some other provisions that you have to think about. The Harris, I would say, for most rifles, at least in the American market, that most of them do come with a sling swivel stud. Easiest to attach.
Pretty plug and play.
Yep. You can easily adapt this as well, but there's some thought that you have to put into it. Same thing with the MDTs, and we have an example of an MDT bipod. They make lighter versions of this too. This is a pretty full featured pod, competition use. Not that you couldn't hunt with it. There's a lot going on there. And then the Spartan, you'd need at least an adapter to make a sling swivel stud into that little magnetic thing. Mm-hmm.
I have seen where folks have, had a gunsmith, tap the front end of their stock, and so it's almost like a flush cup type system.
Yep.
That is attractive to me.
Yeah. I agree. Now, we did mention earlier there's a couple not on the table, and three pretty notable units. The Neopod, which is a really clever bipod. We've actually had it on the podcast before when we had Lightweight Dave in.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
He's got a Neopod. I think they're about 5 or 6 ounces.
Mm-hmm.
There's the Backlands from New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
Here again, about a 5-6 ounce bipod.
You got another accent for us?
No, we won't do that. And then there's the I got to look up the official name. I've handled the Backlands only very briefly. Mountain Gear from New Zealand. They also make an extremely feature-rich bipod, ultralight again, coming in at about 5.5 ounces, 5 ounces flat for the mountain bipod. So they're in a whole different category of weight, where, you know, the Spartan, as light as it is, these other 3 mentioned are even lighter yet. Understand that some concessions come with that. Like this MDT and this Atlas, I mean, these are like monster robust, right? So you can preload, you can put a bunch of weight on them. You're not going to get a lot of flex. The lighter we go with anything, I think the more limited you are in what you can get away with preloading, or with features and angles and things like this. Now the Backlands and the Mountain Gear appear to address that with features. I'd be curious to know, like, could you put them with the same degree of confidence on like a very heavyweight rifle? And maybe that's like a mismatch or an imbalance.
Right, because
right.
You've gone away, like, why do I need a lightweight hunting bipod when I'm, you know, shooting a 20-pound gun?
Right. Do they retain the same level of stability that we would expect out of, like, say, this MDT or the Atlas, for instance? But I think that's not the point. To your point, Mark, we're talking about lightweight hunting bipods for lightweight hunting rifles.
Some of it, to me, also depends on, and maybe this is just like some sort of non-logical mental thing with me. But if I was like predator hunting or something like that, which really it could be a situation where you are covering miles, but somehow I'm more okay having a heavier rifle for that application with a more robust bipod, with a bipod that gets higher, that has more adjustment. Maybe it's just because you're calling and you're you know, setting up in that set. You might need to have your hands free if you're doing hand calling, but still make a subtle motion to get your rifle into position depending on the terrain. You might be laying, you know, prone, but have your bipod legs, you know, over a hill. But these are all things that you might have to do with your big game hunting too.
That's very true. You know, Mark, this is an ultralight bipod. These are the best.
Oh my! Okay.
These are the best ultralight bipod I've ever run. Right here, shooting sticks. We'll just put those back. We've talked about those.
They will. We did that shooting sticks bipod. We're both big fans of shooting sticks.
The only thing I can't do with shooting sticks is fire from a prone position at the same height of prone that I would from one of these bipods. But golly, I've got a pack for that. But I really am thinking hard on one of these rascals. It's pretty cute. They're very clever.
I think it just depends on
what you're doing.
On what you're doing.
Also, what helps you be confident in the field. You know, if tacking another between 12 and 16 ounces on your gun is not an imposition, well, then it's a useful tool to have when you need it. Right. Because without one, you might not have that shot. So
I know, and that's a pretty big consideration. You think, you know, I've taken a week of vacation. You know, I've got a, you know, X amount, $1,000, you know, elk or deer tag, you know, out of state hunt, all the time, effort, resources, few extra ounces that could make the difference.
Yep. Makes a big difference when you want to come out heavy.
Yes. Yeah, you might be coming out lighter than you would like.
Yeah.
Without.
I'll say that I got one more thing.
Yeah.
If you go with a bipod on your rifle, you should really shoot your rifle off that bipod to see how it behaves.
Okay, I was going to get there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, no, I'm glad. So let's talk about that.
So, for instance, I have a Kimber 84 Mountain Ascent 308. Wonderful little rifle. It shoots very different off a bipod on a hard surface than it does off a bag, a pack, even these shooting sticks. I get a wildly different behavior out of the gun. So bipod bounce, or whatever influence you want to attribute to the use of a bipod on your rifle, can show you something different downrange.
Now, are you seeing in this instance like a like just a shift in your zero. So if you like sight in with the bipod on,
POI shift, and I would say generally a little bit different accuracy.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was my next question. Something to think about.
It is, in fact.
Don't just zero your rifle and then screw the old bipod on, and then think you might be good to go. This MDT, tons of adjustment.
As much as you can get.
This is the double. So, and I'd say very fast. I mean, you know.
You want to talk about stability? You get that thing laid out flat like that, and then you splay that thing way out. Ooh, my gosh!
I mean, you could do some work with that.
I think so.
And then, you know, to increase some height.
There's smoke coming off of your bipod when you did that. That was interesting.
That's a little
anodizing there.
A little dust there. You know, you can get pretty high. And this is where, you know, I was talking with Nick a little bit about this as well. But, you know, maybe you are here, your body position is here, or, you know, maybe the roll of the hill brings your bipod. Oh, great, now I'm still level, you know.
Depending on your terrain, you can get into some high angle shots with that pretty easily, and it will accommodate it.
You know, I don't know. Again, depending on what I'm doing,
it may be the tool for the job.
You're going to pay for it with this one, though. They are pretty proud of it. Looking at, you know, about $900, which is, there's a lot of rifles that cost about $900. Well, they don't make those anymore.
I know it.
So where do we go from here?
I think you should evaluate whether or not you need a bipod, or if you have one and you're thinking it's definitely the thing that you got to slap on your rifle, do some shooting with it. See how you like it. Is it comfortable? Is it not? I know there's been a lot of times I've been on the range with like newer shooters, and you know, we get into a prone discussion and you start shooting off a pod, and for some folks it's just not as easy as it looks. Right? It's not as intuitive as you might think. And again, for me personally, you know, starting my journey as a Western big game hunter, you know, a couple of years ago, 2007, I think, I've learned that I don't need it as much as I thought. So I've gotten away from them. There are certainly situations in which they would have been useful.
I know.
But I had to make a concession, you know, because of I left my pack somewhere. I didn't have my shooting sticks handy or something like that. And it had been nice to have one that was maybe a little bit different.
One thing, I think if you decide not to use a bipod, you kind of start thinking thinking about your shots in different ways.
Absolutely.
You end up picking different places to shoot from, or, oh, maybe I need to get over here because I can't shoot from here, which, you know, oftentimes works, right? You just adapt to the situation. But there's also times where it'd be much more beneficial if I didn't have to go over there and I could just shoot from here.
Absolutely.
And shoot right now.
Yep. Some diligence.
These are the things that haunt me, Ryan, because, you know, I'm a what if.
I'll tell you this, and this is not just a shameless Vortex Edge plug. You go ahead and you take the Hunter Marksmanship course, which is pretty much like our long-range course, but with an emphasis on 650 yards and in. Whew. Justin and Pete and Chris will flex on you hard. And Corey, too. And they'll make you think about positional shooting. After I took that class, I spent the better part of the summer working on positional shooting, like field expedient positional shooting. So using my pack, using terrain, using trees, using my shooting sticks, using a combination of all those things, and working out at those distances, 500 meters and in, because I have access to that 500 meter range. And I learned a lot.
Any bipod stuff in that class?
Optional. I did not bring a bipod. I brought my Stone Glacier Sky Talus, and I brought my shooting sticks. And every shot I took, outside of like in the box blind, actually that's not even true. We had a goofy shot in the box blind. I used my shooting sticks as a rear support off of the chair. So I had these hooked into the buttstock and like this. But there were students in the class that I took, and most of them that did have bipods, that either found a distinct advantage using the bipod or found frustration, depending on where we were at.
If you're going to use a bipod,
Yeah.
do you think a person should also be planning to use a rear bag to fully extrapolate the benefits?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly helps. I mean, the more points of contact you can have to create a stable firing solution, I think that's absolutely advantageous. I think, yes, in short, a rear bag might not be the thing to call it, because I don't know that I'll ever carry a rear bag into the field.
Okay.
A rear support.
Rear support.
Yeah.
Improvised rear bag.
Yes.
I was even looking at, I've got a set of Stone Glacier puffy pants. Yep. In the, they come with a little bag. Right? I was like, oh, yeah. I mean, you look at a lot of the items in your kit, you're like, that could be a rear bag, that could be a rear bag. Heck, like I said, if I had a bipod, but I did have my pack with me, I mean, you can shove that.
Oh, yeah.
So there's definitely, and I guess that's what I was thinking, because, they also make some lightweight rear bags now.
They do. It's just I don't think I'm going to carry a rear bag standalone. What I will do, and I have done, you take a fleece beanie and you take your flip wool mitts and you stuff them into that fleece beanie, and then you ball it up. That's a pretty good rear bag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, another honorable mention that I wish we had here, the Magpul bipod.
Oh, yes. There's a very economical,
lightweight,
and useful.
Very functional.
Yes. Yep.
That's a practical man's bipod right there.
We have them down at Edge. There's most of those rifles are equipped with a Magpul pod. Very stable shooting solution. Surprisingly lightweight. I think they're sub 10 ounces, and very cost effective. Very affordable tool.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good pod.
Yeah, I'd be curious. This is, for me, and how I think, for big game hunting.
Yeah.
The Spartan is, although, that one comes with a price tag too, but I think because it just so easily attaches and detaches, because I don't necessarily, I guess for big game hunting, I don't like having that on the forend of my gun all the time.
Correct.
But it's kind of like, oh man, if I need that, I just boop.
One time I used to hunt with a tall Harris. I mentioned that. I was crawling through something and I hooked a branch and pulled the thing back. And when one of those legs goes and gets over its cam point,
Bong.
Yeah, it's loud and scared me. It didn't hurt anything, like it didn't goof my hunt up, but yeah.
I think it's interesting how really like same but different. A lot of different mouse traps here, and I think the one you pick depends
on you.
Yeah. And your budget.
Yep.
But I'd be curious, folks out there in the big game hunting world, predator hunting world, what bipod are you using? Are you using one? Have you? Is it like an always for you? Are we idiots for not using one?
I don't know.
Right now.
I'll tell you.
I'm saying right now.
Another discussion that's going to come up
in the game.
More and more is tripods.
Tripods.
Yeah. It's kind of the new hotness too.
That's pretty. And that might be something, depending on your situation, that you have with you.
Yes.
If you're bringing a spotting scope or you're glassing off your binos.
Does that
eliminate the need?
I've shot off my tripod too.
More than one way to skin this stability cat, isn't there?
The old stability cat.
All right, guys, let us know. I genuinely want to hear what you're doing, how you are living with or living without a bipod, how you're using them, which one are you using, some stuff that maybe we missed here.
We should get some of those ultralight New Zealand produced. They look really cool.
I'd like to look at them.
They look really cool.
I'd like to look at them. Yeah. So, all right, thanks everybody for listening. Stay stable. Talk to you later.
See you.